So the first thing to understand here is that Immich's documentation is not Linux documentation, it is real documentation. That means that it actually works and it is actually understandable by humans. I don't have to write some sort of special documentation here where I say, oh, by the way, you don't use these 4 ways to install OnlyOffice because they don't work, use this one. Oh, I know this program says that it has a follow symlink option, but that actually only works if you install a version from this repository or any of that other crap. It just works. It's beautiful. I'm going to be installing Immich on the Android Stuff virtual machine. This is the virtual machine that I'm using for all of the different Android services like SyncThing for backups, like Google Drive, for OnlyOffice, which is going to be my replacement for Google Docs and Google Sheets, and natural place to put Immich, which is my replacement for Google Photos. I'm going to be using Immich differently than how most people use Immich, and I'm going to explain why I do it this way. I'm not using Immich to copy my photos from my Android phone over to my server. That doesn't make sense because SyncThing is already doing that. I don't want to have 2 different tools to back up stuff from one device to the other when I can have one tool that does it that's doing a better job of it. SyncThing is not only going to back up the DCIM camera directory with my photos in it, it's also going to back up my music directory, movies directory, documents directory, audiobooks directory, and SyncThing also allows that 2-way sync. So if there's an audiobook that I want to transfer to my phone, I can just put it on my server in the audiobooks directory and it automatically transfers here. SyncThing is the tool that I want to use for backups. I don't want to use Immich for that because I already have a tool set to do that job. So what I'm going to do is instead of setting up Immich so that it's just uploading all the photos I take on my phone to my server, I'm going to set it up so that Immich has access to that SyncThing directory. So remember, we set it up so that all the photos we take on our phone that go to that DCIM camera directory are backed up to Home, Lewis, Android Backup, DCIM. I'm going to give Immich access to that directory as an external library. Next up, I'm going to give it access to that giant ZFS pool that is running on the host system. That ZFS pool, media pool archive that we set up. On my system, I have a 100 terabyte ZFS pool that has all sorts of crap over the past 20 years that I have not sorted through properly. And I like having Immich available with the machine learning so that I could just type whatever random thing in there and I can find a photo from 16 years ago that I forgot that I took. I want Immich to have access to all of that, but this is going to be where it gets a little bit difficult. It's running inside the virtual machine, and I have to give it access to something that is on the host system. No big deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mount that media pool archive folder under Home, Lewis, Pictures, ZFS pool inside of my virtual machine, and then I can give Immich access to it that way. So I'm going to have 2 different external libraries, and when I set up Immich, I'm going to have to give it access to those 2 directories. Immich is run within Docker. Docker is completely containerized. What that means is that it is isolated from the rest of the system. Unless I explicitly tell Immich when I'm building it, you have the ability to see what's in the Home, Lewis, Android Backup, DCIM folder. You have the ability to see what's in the Home, Lewis, Pictures, ZFS pool folder. It's not going to be able to see those things. So that's how I'm going to be setting it up. First things first is that Immich does require Docker in order to work. I already installed Docker on the Android Stuff virtual machine when I installed OnlyOffice. If you skipped installing OnlyOffice because you felt like you didn't need it, that's totally fine, but that means that you likely didn't install Docker on the Android Stuff virtual machine. And if that's the case, you can easily follow the instructions that I have here for how to do that. It says right over here, you don't need to perform this step if you already installed Docker while installing OnlyOffice. But if you didn't install Docker while installing OnlyOffice, it's going to tell you how to do that right here, and it gives basic instructions and makes sure to tell you not to use the shitty-ass snap version of Docker. I'm not going to be installing Docker while I'm showing you how to do this because I already installed Docker when I installed OnlyOffice. But if you didn't, make sure that you read those directions and do so in the written guide, or just rewind back to the OnlyOffice installation section of this video where I installed Docker and show you how to do that. I want to set this up in a way where if something absolutely horrific happens with the Android Stuff virtual machine, while it does have access to my files in my ZFS pool, it cannot erase them. It's going to be read-only. That is going to be read-only, so it's not going to be able to fuck with it in any given way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit the Samba share that I have going on Happy Cloud, and I'm going to add another one for Immich. So first things first, let's get started by SSHing into Happy Cloud, SSH, Lewis at, I could either do happycloudhome.opera or this. And we're going to edit the Samba share that we set up earlier at ect samba sumb.conf. This is how we set it up. This was the archive Samba share. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another one for Immich, which is pretty much going to be this, but it is going to be one that is only able to be mounted as read only. And we are going to call that Immich. Yeah, so this is read only. Gonna restart Samba. Okay. Now we're gonna SSH into the Android stuff virtual machine, which again, I could do that, or I could do Android stuff, home ARPA, either one's fine. Clear this, because it kind of makes a mess. And first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna edit my ect FUTO file. FUTO is going to say what mounts every time I boot the machine. And I'm gonna want this to mount every time I boot the machine. And that's going to look like this. Wow. That's the share. We're going to mount it on pictures. The 2 slashes over here means that's how you do it for Samba shares. The file system is Sisyphus. We're going to make it read-only. And the credentials, because you need a username and a password to log in, are going to be at ect samba credentials. And we're going to use version 3.0 of Samba. Let me hope I didn't typo anything there. Just going to double check to see if I typoed anything. I love typoing things. Okay, next up, I'm going to make sure that the pictures directory in my home is actually there. Now we're going to create the Samba credentials file. And the Samba credentials file is going to look like this. Username equals Lewis. Password, this is the set password you made for the Samba user so that they can connect in. Hypersecure password. Now we're going to make it so that nobody can look at this shit unless they're root. And now we mount and we pray. I forgot, in order for that to work, I have to install Sisyphus utils. So it's not actually going to allow me to mount the Samba share unless I actually have the Samba installed. Imagine that. Yeah, I'm not smart. This is why I write my guide as I do it myself. The best way to proofread documentation is to actually do it. My entire written documentation is based on me doing it. This is the best way, in my opinion, to ensure that your documentation actually works. So yeah, I've installed that, and now when I go to pictures, I should be able to see stuff that I made on my host. So if I go over to my host, don't need that. I'm on Happy Cloud. And I go to Media Pool, Archive, and I say, I should be able to go to Android stuff. Okay, now again, you want to make sure that I can't delete things over here. Oh. Doesn't work. Beautiful. Making this video has been unbelievable. In the amount of time that I've spent making this video, I have had 5 hard drives in my own server die, 2 video cards in the 2 computers I've been using to record and edit this video, 2 NVMe SSDs, and 1 CPU. On the upside, my kitty loves me. So, at the end of the day, I win. So, what I'm going to do is we're going to start now with installing Immich. Now that that is done, let's try again, shall we? So again, one of the beautiful things here is we can just follow directions that are laid out for us by the Immich creators because they just work. So first things first, in our terminal, I like to have a directory called downloads programs. And in this case, we're going to have Immich app. I'm going to go to that directory. And I can literally just copy and paste from Immich's directions because they actually work. We're going to download the Docker Compose file, and we're going to grab the environment file. Now, I'm not going to be grabbing the file for hardware accelerated encoding or hardware accelerated machine learning, because I don't have a Coral, I don't have a real GPU to put in there, so I'm not going to be using any of that anyway. And it's a little bit experimental, so using it can somewhat be a pain in the ass. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to edit the .environment file, and you're going to have to put your time zone in here. You may wonder, I don't know what my time zone is. What the hell does that mean? Well, look at how nice the Immich developers are. They actually put over here. Here's where you could find a list with your time zone, so you know exactly which one to put in there, which is just beautiful. I love the people who developed this program. So I'm going to put in America, Chicago, and that's that. Now for the database password, again, over here, this is for the database running inside of the Docker container. So for somebody to get access to this, they would have to know the username and the password of this host computer. They would need to have broken through your VPN and logged into it, or broken into your house. So at this point, this is one of those things where by the time you're that fucked, this is really just window dressing at that point. But just because, good practice, I'll put a real password in there. And it says use A to Z caps, A to Z lowercase, or 0 to 9. Don't use any, it doesn't want me to use any of that stuff, so I will respect it. That is that. Now the next step, you don't have to edit the Docker Compose file. The way it's set up is 100% good to go. You do not have to edit this if you don't want to. Again, I'm editing it from my use case because I want my Android backup folder to be the external library here. I need to tell it that it can see that external library. I am not going to be using my Android phone to be uploading stuff to Immich, so I need to edit the volume section over here. The volume section is going to be, whoops, wrong. Okay, here we go. Yeah, under Immich server, under volumes, I'm going to add the 2 directories that I want to show up inside Immich. So first one is home, Lewis, Android, backup, DCIM. And that's going to show up, I want to show up inside the container. It's going to look like that's at files, phone, pics. And I'm going to make that read write. Now for the ZFS backup, that I had at home Lewis pictures, and that I'm going to have show up at files / phone pics. It's going to be ZFS pics, and that's going to be read only. That's the only modification I'm going to be doing to this. I'm not going to mess with the rest of it. I don't like this. I don't have any reason to really mess with the rest of it over here. So Control X, Y to save. And now that is that. So I can watch it run and watch it start up. Now again, usually you run Docker Compose up and then a -D. The -D means that it's going to run even if you close that terminal. It's running in the background and you don't have to do anything. If you run Docker Compose up, the moment you close the terminal, the program's going to end. So I want to see what's happening as it's going. I don't want to look at a log file because it's just not as colorful and as pretty as when it's running on the screen in real time. But I also don't want it to turn off immediately. So I do something called screen. Screen is a nice little program. If you don't have it, you do sudo apt install screen. I think I already have it installed. Here we go. So when you go screen, watch this. This is pretty cool. Screen -S. I'm going to do Immich Docker. I now have something where I can close that window and it'll still work. So watch this. I'm going to run Docker Compose up. So as you can see, this is going. Let me just close some of my other tabs and make sure I don't have stuff you're not supposed to see in there. So I'm going to close on this tab. Now I'm over here. Now I'm going to SSH back into my Android.home, Android stuff, home.arpa. Watch this. Isn't it cool? So this is going to take a while to download everything. And while it's doing that, I'm going to do some chores. So I have a bunch of stuff that I need to catch up on. .192.168.5.5, and the port it was listed in the Docker file was 2283. Welcome to Immich. Getting started. Admin email. I will do Lewis plus lolcopter at fucking nice. Yeah. Password, something highly secure. Name Lewis. Sign up. Beautiful. I'm not going to save it because I'm going to be throwing this away soon anyway. Use it. Now I'm going to log in and let's set it up. So once you're done, set a theme. I set the light theme, not the dark theme, because I'm psycho. Version check I'll use, and the map one, I'm not really interested in the map one. Storage template. It will auto-organize based on a user-defined template. I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to use it. Trust me, I'm not very smart. And now we're in like Flynn, as Dave Jones from EV Blog would say. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to click my name in the upper right corner, that little circle with the first letter of my username that I chose. And then I'm going to click on Administration. From Administration, we're going to go to External Libraries, and I'm going to add those 2 directories that I created in the Docker Compose file, or that I specified in the Docker Compose file, of the SyncThing Android phone backup and the directory that has all of my ZFS pool archive photos. I'm going to click the plus. It says Select Library Owner, Create with my name, and I'm going to create another one now. Create another external library. Now it creates the 2 external libraries with no settings, no names, no paths or anything. So I click the 3 dots, go Name. We're going to name this Phone Pics. Save. And I'm going to set the import path. An import path, remember, the import path is going to be what you put in your Docker Compose file. So I set it so that Home Lewis Android Backup, DCIM, which is the directory that all of the pictures from my Android phone are backed up to on my server, is going to show up at Files, Phone Pics inside of my container. So when I go back here, I click Add Path, Files, Phone Pics, Add. Save. Now for the other one, I'm going to rename this to ZFS Pics. And the path I'm going to add for this external library, edit import paths, add paths, files, ZFS pics, add, save. Now, after that's done, go over to settings. Shout out to OBS for crashing on me right as I'm about to finish this section. After I do the external libraries, there are a couple of settings that I like to change. Everything here is most likely just fine as it is. The first thing I like to do is in image settings, we have thumbnails and we have previews. What this does is it's going to create the preview files that you see when you're scrolling through. So if you're on a low bandwidth connection, it's very useful to change this. If you, let's say you're on a really crappy connection, you may want to change this to maybe 200p and 70 instead of 80 and 250p, and the same thing with preview. But the default settings are absolutely fine as is. What I really like to focus on are the video transcoding settings. So what this does is it's going to re-encode your videos if you wanted to, so that they are smaller, so that they are easier to view if you have a shitty internet connection. Now, if I want to view the video in full resolution, I can easily do that by logging in and using VLC to find my file, or OWL files or something like that. When I'm using Immich, it's usually to show somebody something really quickly, and I have a Pixel phone, which means I don't have service almost anywhere I go. So I like to change these settings to make it a little bit more efficient. So I am not just going to re-encode certain videos, because it's not going to re-encode all videos. It's only going to re-encode videos that are in funky codecs. I'm going to tell it to re-encode everything. So it's going to re-encode all of my videos. Now, when it does this, it's going to save them in a subdirectory of Immich app. It's not going to actually re-encode the videos on my server and delete the originals. That's an important one, because I know some people may go, oh my God, is it going to delete my videos with lower quality versions? That's not happening. So I tell it to re-encode all of my videos, and I usually use a setting that is a little bit more aggressive. So the higher this number goes, the lower the quality, and I would actually set it to 28. Now, if you have a powerful computer and you don't mind having it sit for a while, you can move this over to fast or medium. Anything slower than fast or medium, if you move this to slow or very slow or something like that, you're not going to notice any difference. But up to about fast or medium, that's about the area where you're going to get improvements. I mean, maybe if you have a really slow computer and you're just impatient, keep it at ultra fast. If you're not and you want the file size to be smaller, if you value the file size being smaller so that it's easier to stream that content, set it to something like fast. I use video codec H.264 because it usually has the highest and widest compatibility, and I don't use hardware acceleration because that's something that I don't have a GPU in that computer anyway, so it doesn't really make much of a difference to me. I shouldn't say don't have a GPU. I don't have a real GPU in that computer. It's more of a, I kind of have like a fill-in toaster GPU in that computer. Last one I like to go to is job settings. This is very conservative on the amount of threads that it uses in my computer. So for instance, if I have a computer that has 14 cores, I don't want you transcoding one video at a time. I would rather that you transcode a couple videos at a time. Now granted, it was set to 0 for transcoding video with regards to how many cores the encoder is going to use, but like every now and then it just doesn't use everything. So I would maybe set that to do 3 at a time. When it comes to everything else here, generate thumbnails, concurrency. Obviously, if I have 16 cores in my machine, I'm going to want that to be way more. I'll let it do 20 at a time. Smart search, face detection, all this stuff, I'll let it do multiple at a time. So I would raise this based on the number of cores in your system, and that's about it. Lastly, when it comes to external library, I like to watch external libraries for file changes. You are going to want to turn that on because you are going to be uploading stuff to your external library constantly. SyncThing is going to always be taking stuff off of your Android phone and adding it to your external library. So I would most certainly toggle this one and enable periodic library scanning. Absolutely. I would absolutely love for that to happen. We want those to be where they are. I'm not going to save these settings because I don't, well, you know, I am using not the fastest CPU with regards to encoding a bunch of video for this. After that's done, you're going to go over to jobs and you are going to hit all on each of these things over here. I believe, I'm 99% certain that if you hit all on library tasks, that it actually does do everything, but I honestly just like clicking buttons, so I'm going to click all on everything just because it makes me feel better. I like hitting all on everything. It's beautiful.